experts is about to join. We will wait for a couple of minutes.
বলো না ওটা আমার ফোনটা দাও ওখান থেকে স্ট্যাটাসে শেয়ার করে নেবো ফোনটা দাও স্ট্যাটাসে শেয়ার করতে হবে লিঙ্কটা তাড়াতাড়ি দাও হ্যাঁ 10 জন মাত্র জয়েন করেছে
In halls of knowledge, bold and bright, stands InnovaWorld, a guiding light. With wisdom vast and skills
evening, sir.
untold, they shape the future,
Good evening.
brave and bold.
Yes, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, it's perfect.
From
So,
AI's rise to
then, sir,
research
shall we
call,
start
they
the
train
session?
the minds to conquer
Yes,
all.
not an issue with me. You can just go ahead with the session.
Yes. Shalu, you may start the session.
Okay, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the job seekers, job hunters, freshers, students, and placement officers joining us for the Day 2 Bootcamp Mastering HR Rounds, organized by the Academic InnovaWorld and powered by Indian Science Technology and Engineering.
Shalu?
Today we have two interview rounds.
Yeah.
Academic now holding as. Yes, ma'am.
You're not audible actually. Yeah, now you're audible.
Okay, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the job seekers, job hunters, freshers, students, and placement officers joining us for the Day 2 Boot Camp Mastering HR Rounds, organized by the Academic InnovaWorld and powered by Indian Science and Technology and Hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, ma'am. Mastering HR round organized by the Academic InnovaWorld and powered by Indian Science, Technology and Engineering Facilities MAP. Today we have two sessions. Session 1, how to build resume. Session 2, how to tackle HR interview rounds. Academic InnovaWorld, it's a hub for research-driven innovation, technical excellence, and intellectual property creation. Founded in 2017 as a YouTube channel for aerospace enthusiasts, now holding as MSME registered STEM Research Center organized across India. Unlike conventional academies, our academic operates a dedicated R&D cell collaborating with researchers, scientists, and industry mentors with candidates, a rare offering in the education sector. Recently, Academic InnovaWorld has been declared as India's first private research and innovation hub, which was featured by Republic News and Gujarat Journal. In today's competitive job market, excelling the HR round is very crucial, whether you are a fresher or an experienced professional. This bootcamp is designed to equip you with the right strategy, confidence, and expertise to ace interviews across domain. I welcome to Dr. Aishwarya Dhara, founder of Academic InnovaWorld, visionary leader, Mr. Pulak Kumar Dhara, Chief Technology Officer and Organizing Chair, former Assistant Scientist at the Department of Atomic Energy, guides our technological advancement through innovative projects and consultancy. Dr. Arunav Majumdar, Research Advisory, whose innovative approaches navigate the research landscapes. Mr. Ponma Kishan, event manager, provides technical support to handle reach out outreach activities, and a very warm welcome to today's guest speaker, Santanu Shekhar, who is a young professional at the Minister of Labour and Employment, Assam. Over the next 3 days, our industry experts will share insider tips, real world scenario, and hands on practice to help you stand out. For those just joining, kindly ensure you type your name, department, and institute name in the chat box. Let's make this an interactive and insightful experience. Let me invite our Chief Technology Officer, PK Dhara, to drive the inaugural address.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure the, to inaugurate this 3-day bootcamp, Mastering HR Rounds, organized by Academy InnovaWorld Research Training Center and powered by Indian Science, Technology and Engineering Facility Map. This bootcamp is designed to help students and professionals excel in HR interviews, whether for placement, internship, or career growth. What exciting is huge participation to 82% student and 12% faculties with strong representations from engineering and science background. Interestingly, 68.9% are yet to graduate, meaning they are getting a head start on interview skill, while 32% are graduates refine their expertise. These events will boost confidence, teach key HR strategies, and provide real-time practice, ensuring everyone leaves better preparation for their careers. Let's make the most of these 3 days. Best of luck to all participants. Thank you.
It is our privilege to introduce today's distinguished speaker, a dynamic professional with a passion for empowering individuals and driving impactful change, Mr. Shantanu Shekhar Saikia. With over 7+ years of cross-functional expertise in government consulting, digital communication, and policy implementation, Mrs. Saikia has been at the forefront of bridging employment gaps and fostering career opportunities. Currently, he serves as a young professional with the Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India, under the National Career Service (NCS) project. In this pivotal role, he works closely with government machinery to enhance employment opportunities, particularly in work closely with government machinery to enhance employment opportunities, particularly in economically backward regions, and has collaborated with the governments of Assam and Mizoram to drive meaningful outcomes. His dedication to training and skill development has been recognized by prestigious institutions like the Electronics and ICT Academy, IIT Guwahati, where he contributed to their faculty development programs on behavioral remodeling and ITC tools for classroom delivery. Academically, Mr. Sakai holds a Master of Commerce (MCom) from Guwahati University, specializing in marketing and management, and his career spans diverse domains from marketing and education to governmental initiatives and policy implementation. A truly advocate for career growth and skill enhancement, Mr. Shekhar brings a wealth of practical insights, HR strategies, and real-world experience to today's session. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Shantanu Shekhar as he shares his invaluable insights with us. Dear participants, feel free to type your question in the chat box. We will address them at the end of the session. Without further delay, let's learn about resume building and CV mastery from our expert. Mr. Santanu Shekhar sir, the virtual stage is yours. We are eager to learn from your insights. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good
sir.
One
One
evening
second.
to.
second, welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, over
Yeah,
to you,
over to
sir.
you, sir.
Yes. Very good evening to everyone who's present here to like attend my program. I'm hope my voice is actually audible to everyone like who is attending the program right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is that actually I'll be diving straight into the topic of discussion today because like if someone is joining in so late in the evening to attend such a session, I don't think it's wise to waste our time. All right. So the thing is that I'll dive straight into the session that I was planning to host, and like I'll just straight away start my presentation at this point of time. If anyone has any like queries or like questions in between, I'd like to address them, but I think that is best left till the end. All right. So I hope it's going to be a very information packed session, I would say. So taking notes is actually recommended, or at least whichever slides interest you, I think you can like take a screenshot. All right. So I hope my voice is clear, right? I can just start presenting my screen at this point of time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, sir.
sure, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
One second. All right. So my presentation is like showing up at this point of time, right?
Yeah.
Sir, is
Sir,
it
is it
possible to
possible to
make it?
make it a?
Yeah,
Yeah,
fine, sir.
fine, sir.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good to
good
hear,
to hear,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So as you can like learn uh, from the heading itself, like this is going to be a small session on the essential elements of resume building. So my name is Shantanu. My name is full name is Santanu Saikia, and I'm working as a young professional for the National Career Service. If I get the time, I'll definitely discuss about what the National Career Service project does in the greater context of providing employment in India. But firstly, let's talk about the core topic of today. All right. So firstly, the basic thing that I need to talk about is the concept of a CV, a resume, and a biodata. All right. So basically, what happens? A lot of people actually have a confusion regarding what's a CV, what's a resume, and what's a biodata. And actually, the issue actually arises because a lot of people actually see these terms used interchangeably, and they actually get confused on where to use what sort of document, and they actually fail miserably in all sort of contexts. For example, let's say typically a resume is actually used for a job search. All right. So in that case, if you are sending a CV, all right, which is a very comprehensive sort of a document, it actually reduces your chance of actually getting selected. I'll talk about why that's the reason. Just give me a second on like talking about what a CV is. All right. Firstly, let's learn about what a CV is like, and let's look at some examples. So firstly, I'd like to say is that CV stands for curriculum vitae, right? So as you can like imagine from the title of from the full form of this word, it actually relates somewhat to academics. All right. So basically, CV is like a very comprehensive. It's like a detailed academic diary that includes all of your experiences, your educational background, especially regarding your educational background and the sort of publications that you have and sort of like publications there where you have actually contributed. All right. But the resume is a little bit different from a CV in the sense that a resume is actually a very brief one page summary of your work experience and background relevant to the job that you're applying for. Why I'm saying one page, I'll get back to that point later. However, as of just to make it simple in understanding what I'm talking about, uh, you can think about a CV as a very long sort of a document and resume as a very brief sort of a document. All right. Similarly, there's another document which is actually used interchangeably in terms of in scenarios where employment is concerned, which is a biodata. All right. Earlier, what used to happen was a biodata was actually considered a shorter version of a resume. But nowadays, actually, a biodata is actually a longer form of a resume, where it also includes certain additional details of your personal life. For example, you might need to include your passport status, your physical attributes, all right, for very specific sorts of jobs. For example, let's say I do get some job seekers who are actually like trying to move abroad and like find let's say find a job in healthcare in the Middle East. All right. So in those cases, sending a simple resume is not enough. They also have to include certain certifications, certain sort of medical tests that they have been through in order to apply for certain jobs. All right. So in those cases, a biodata is actually required in place of a resume. But those are very edge cases. Actually, resume is very widely required for a lot of cases. Biodata is required, but it's going to be used in only very niche cases at this point of time. All right. So firstly, let's look at how a CV looks. All right. So you'll have an idea. So the thing is, all right. So the thing is that this is a CV of a person. So basically, I have redacted all of his information at this point of time because this is a real CV. I hope everyone can see the CV, right?
No, sir. Like we can only see the slides.
Okay. Just one second. I think there might be an issue with that. Right. So you can see the entire screen at this point now. Is it?
Not yet, sir.
Just one second. Actually,
Sir, still we can see your presentation.
no, I get it. Actually, I should select the screen. All right. So I hope like everyone can see the CV.
Yeah.
No?
Right. We can
Right.
see it.
Right. So the thing is that this is a CV and this is a real CV of a real person. So I have actually redacted their names and like other identifiable information at this point of time. This looks like a resume at the first glance, right? So if we scroll, like this looks like a resume. However, if you look at the page numbers, right? So number of pages which are there in this document, this is like a 15-page document. So this is a CV. All right. So the thing is that actually a CV is actually meant to be a very comprehensive sort of a document about your educational background. So like even with a very sort of like a very modest background, I would say, a person typically has around has a CV of around 3 or 4 pages. Like that is very common. Even a person like me, like who has never been like very academically inclined, I would say I can easily create a 4-page CV just from my educational background and publications and my public speaking arrangements. So the thing is that a CV is actually meant to be a very comprehensive document. We do not leave any information out of the CV. Whatever we can, we try to include in a CV. For example, for this person, right? So basically, he has been an assistant professor, tenure track. Then he has been a guest assistant professor of IT. All right, at IIT. And like if we go to the next page, then we can find a whole list of awards and grants and honors that he has received. All right, then we go on to his teaching experience. Now you can see like he is mentioning like each one of the teaching experiences that he has. He's not discriminating whether this teaching experience has been higher value or not. So basically the thing is that he's not actually he's not making the information concise, he's making it totally detailed. All right, but the thing is that if we close the CV for a second and we actually look at another document which is a resume, you will immediately see what sort of differences are there. All right. So this is a sample resume which I'm about to show you. So if you look at the number of pages in this document, there's only one page. All right. So typically what happens, a resume a resume, the primary use case of a resume is to actually make the hiring manager for a job, all right, take notice and invite you for an interview. It is not meant to provide a complete record, a complete detail of your entire employment history. All right. So I'll get into strategies where like we can actually shorten a CV, how we can include certain keywords on how to make a CV stand out from the competition. But the basic thing that you have to keep in mind, there's a small rule of thumb that I would like encourage everyone to like follow, is for every decade of your work experience, all right, for every 10 years of your work experience, you can maybe devote one additional page in your CV. So for example, let's say if I take my case as a job seeker who is actually creating a resume, what I'll do is I'll actually create a one page resume, not more than that. Let's say if I've worked for 20 years, then maybe I'll create a two-page resume. All right. So basically, that is the only difference between a CV and a resume. A CV is meant to be a very long document where every detail is included. A resume is meant to be a very short document. Basically, a resume is like a marketing brochure. It is the sort of document that you hand over to a hiring manager in order to make him take up notice on whether he should actually invite you for an interview or not. So this is one of the very common scenarios that I actually see in my office every day. Typically, we only ask for a resume for 99% of candidates, and I regularly see a lot of candidates actually they send me their CV. Now the issue with a CV is that since it's a very sort of like a very detailed sort of a document, a lot of in a lot of cases, these CVs are actually chucked aside by the hiring manager simply because they do not have the time to go through each one of these pages. All right. So statistically speaking, actually a hiring manager only has 8 seconds to like decide on whether he should invite a candidate for an interview or not. So you have to make sure that whatever you present in your hiring document, whether it's a CV or a resume, the hiring manager has to make a decision within 8 seconds. So in that scenario, a CV is not a very wise way to actually forward your case on whether a hiring manager should give you an interview call or not. Because let's say if you submit a 10-page CV to a hiring manager, it's quite likely that a hiring manager is actually going to ignore that document simply because of the volume of document that he or she actually has to look into. So this is the reason why actually creating a very crisp, concise resume is so important. I'll talk about certain strategies on how we can create a very crisp and short resume which actually converts. But this is one point that you have to keep in mind. Similarly, let's have a look at how a biodata looks. All right. So I'm just showing you how a biodata looks simply because you need to actually know how it looks from the outset. I'm not going to devote a lot of time talking about the biodata part, but yeah, I think everyone should at least see how a biodata actually looks. So yes, so this is one more document actually which I can recall was actually sent to me. All right. So basically, this is a biodata of a candidate. Like this is a real candidate. All right. So I have redacted his name and other personally identifiable information. So as you can see, like this looks like a resume in the beginning, right? In the beginning, this looks like a resume. However, if you come to the second page, he mentions additional details about like his passport details, his passport number, his issue, date of expiry, place of issue. Why is that? Is basically the reason why he actually mentions this information is because this person actually applied for a job abroad through our employment exchange. All right, through the National Career Service project. This person was actually planning on applying for jobs in the Middle East. And that is the reason why he has actually included his passport details in this document. So even though this looks like a resume, we cannot actually include, we can actually say this is a very good example of a resume. This is actually a good example of a biodata. Similarly, for certain jobs, you might require to submit your physical attributes like your height, your weight, or your physical characteristics. All right. So in those cases, those are not resumes, actually, those are biodata. All right. So biodata is used very sparingly. It's not very common to see biodata for a lot of job searches, but that is one document that exists, and I think everyone should know about this sort of a document. All right. So if a job requires a biodata, the hiring manager is actually specifically going to ask you for it. Typically, biodata is actually required at the end of the job search, just after you have received an offer letter from an organization. Uh, uh, a hiring manager might ask you for a biodata in order to like conduct the background checks. All right. So typically at just the beginning of the hiring, of the hiring process, a hiring manager typically does not ask for a biodata. So now moving on to the presentation. So as we understood, these were like the three definitions of these three documents. All right. So let's look at the use cases for each of the documents. So I'm leaving biodata out because it is just like a longer form of a resume and it is not that common. However, you do have to understand where you have to use a CV and where you have to use a resume. All right. So the basic purpose of a CV is to apply for an academic position. For example, if you are applying for a research grant, if you are applying for a teaching role, in those cases, a CV is required. All right. So the content of the CV will include details like your personal details, your comprehensive academic background, your work experience, your extracurricular activities, accomplishments, and most importantly, you have to highlight each one of the academic accomplishments and publications. All right. And as you can imagine from the examples that I've shown you, the length is like multiple pages are common, and it's quite detailed and very long. But a resume is typically used for corporate jobs. Typically, it is meant to be very short and concise. Information provided in a resume actually changes according to the job that you're applying for. So typically what happens, uh, whenever someone sends a CV, he does not change the content of the CV in order to like appeal to different sort of appear like appeal to different sort of users of the CV. All right. So let's say if I'm applying to University X and I'm applying to University Y, I'm not going to send different CVs to University X and different CVs to University Y. However, in the case of a resume, the information is actually changed according to the job that you are applying for, just to make it seem relevant to the job position that you are applying for. All right. So the thing is that, let's say if I'm applying to company A, my resume is going to be in let's say in a format that I've decided. And if I'm applying for a company B job, even though these are similar kind of jobs, since the companies are different, I'm going to tweak my resume a little bit in order to suit the requirements of company B. And that is how actually people create effective resumes. All right. So that is the reason why typically there's no such thing as crafting a very effective CV, but we do take sessions on crafting effective resumes, because resumes are meant to be changed according to the job that you're applying for. And the length, as you can imagine, is meant to be very short and concise for quick decision. All right. As I talked earlier, resume, whenever a hiring manager is actually looking at a resume, he or she only has like 8 seconds to make a very quick decision. And that is the reason why single pager resumes are much more effective as compared to, let's say, 4 or 5 page resumes. All right. So this is one of the very common mistake regarding resumes that I see all day in my office. Someone who is a fresher, who has very little amount of experience, he actually comes up with a 3-page resume which has all of this fluff content, like which actually has no value in the employment scenario. These sort of resumes actually do not help the interview candidate. It actually harms his chances of getting selected. All right. So typically, in order to understand the purpose of a resume, we actually have to look at the hiring process at a glance. All right. So you might be knowing about how a hiring process works at a company, but I think this is something that we should touch upon at least briefly. All right. Firstly, what happens, how a hiring process works in a company is that a company, especially a talent acquisition manager or a hiring manager, actually publishes a job description or a vacancy listing. All right. After that, he or she actually starts collecting the applicant details and the resumes through different portals, like let's say LinkedIn, through their corporate websites, through job portals. All right. Then a small preliminary shortlist of qualified candidates are made. Then after that, typically a phone round or an email is sent to those candidates in order to appear for the interview. These interviews might be held online or face to face. All right. After clearing the interview round, typically a person who is applying for a job, he is actually issued an offer letter. Offer letter mention what sort of terms of employment that he has to accept, within how many days he or she actually has to join, what sort of salary and the full CTC breakdown will be provided in the offer letter. After the candidate decides on accepting the offer letter, if let's say a candidate accepts the offer letter, a complete background check is done, where it is checked whether the details provided in the resume and the other documents, for example, his past work experience, all of these details are actually checked. All right. And after these checks are over, finally signing of the employment contract and onboarding is done. So basically, this is the hiring process at a glance. And I think 99% of candidates already know how the hiring process works if we look at from the perspective of this slide. All right. But in reality, actually, the hiring process is much more complicated as compared to this. I'm going to talk about that issue a little bit later. But the only reason why I actually brought up this slide is that many a times a lot of people can everyone see my presentation at this point of time?
So we can only see the CV, sir.
Okay, you can see the CV, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Now
actually, yes. So my previous slide, I think you might have missed my previous slide then. Have you missed this slide?
now
right?
we can see, sir, CV and resume.
Okay, got it. I think you might have actually missed this slide. I hope like so whatever I've talked about, like I think people can actually take a screenshot and like decide for themselves at this point of time. So we are moving on. So basically, this is the hiring process at a glance. All right. So a lot of people might be familiar with this hiring process. However, I'm going to get into very sort of detailed nuances of how a hiring process works, because the thing is that typically what I am seeing is that nowadays a lot of people are actually complaining that their resume is not actually going through and they are not getting invited for the interviews. All right. So hence I'm going to have a very detailed session about like how a hiring process actually works from a hiring manager point of view. But however, just to have this discussion, I'm just putting a small concise slide so that everyone is on a similar level of understanding. All right. So I hope like everyone can understand up to this point of time. Now moving on. Traditionally, what happened was the purpose of a resume was to actually get your foot at the door. What do I mean by this expression? It means that the only reason a resume is created is to get invited for an interview. A resume is not actually meant to get someone selected for a job. It is just meant to like pique the interest of the hiring manager and and then motivate him or her to invite someone for an interview. All right. Historically, resumes were actually handed from person to person. So earlier, what used to happen was people used to actually print out resumes. All right. So Gen Zs might not be able to relate to this to this issue, but earlier what used to happen was people used to print out their resumes and like they used to hand out these resumes to different hiring managers, and these hiring managers actually used to look at physical resumes and they had to decide whether to like follow up with these candidates or not. But however, nowadays, after the advent of different hiring platforms like let's say LinkedIn and Naukri, these sort of these sort of physical resumes are actually have been actually passed along for PDF copies of resumes at this point of time, and this is one of the actual reasons why a lot of resumes actually get rejected. All right, so I'm going to talk about in detail of that issue a little bit later. So the only thing that I need to address at this point of time, I think, is the small concern that a lot of people are going to have, is that we are actually going to learn like how we can create a very simple sort of a resume. All right, the traditional resume, like the printed sort of a resume which we used to hand out, because that is one of the very important skills that a lot of people need to understand. And I think that is a very basic idea that we need to provide a lot of people so that actually they can start polishing their resumes from this point of time. So you might be wondering whether the traditional resume, all right, the traditional resume still holds its weight in an era where AI screening seems to dictate initial impressions. So what do I mean by this? So basically, earlier what used to happen was, since we used to hand out physical resumes, there was a very high likelihood that a person is actually going to have a look at your resume and finally going to invite you for an interview. However, nowadays all of these resumes are actually collected online. All right, so through job portals like LinkedIn, through Naukri. So what happens, a lot of these resumes are actually screened through AI tools, as especially with specific tools called the application tracking systems. All right, so in those cases, the traditional use case of a resume is not actually relevant anymore. However, there's one point that a lot of people miss, is that your resume might not get you to the interview. All right, if you are sending a resume online, there's a very high degree of probability that your resume might not get you to the interview. But if you somehow figure out a way to get to the interview, your resume is going to be a critical impression builder for the hiring manager, through which you will be able to guide the interview on your terms. So there's a very famous quote said by Abraham Lincoln, which says that, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So basically, crafting your resume is about sharpening the axe. All right, it is not meant to like help you through the entire hiring journey. It is only meant to help you get invited to an interview, and after you have been invited to an interview, it actually allows you to dictate the terms and the path of the interview on your own terms. If you do not have a very concise, a very sort of a crisp sort of a resume, there's a high degree of probability that a hiring manager is going to start asking you for certain questions which you might not be very comfortable answering. And this is one of the very basic reasons which a lot of people miss about creating a very concise resume. All right, so basically, if we look at this quote, an axe is a strength multiplier. All right, so if you might be the strongest lumberjack in the world, or like you might be the strongest candidate for a job in the world, but with a dull axe you are helpless. Similarly, with a dull sort of a resume, you are quite helpless at the interview stage. All right, so this is one of the reasons why creating an effective resume is so important. All right, now let's look at some of the common essential elements of how to craft a resume. All right. So the basic common essential elements we might all know is your name and contact info. Obviously, your name and contact information will be required, because that is how the hiring manager is going to reach out to you if he has to take your interview. Secondly, you have to provide an objective or a summary of your work experience. All right. Here, a lot of people actually make a mistake of actually mentioning the goal of actually applying for a job. I think this is very irrelevant. Like, writing a goal seems very self-centered. In place of that, I would recommend people should actually write a small job summary of where they have worked, what sort of work responsibilities they might have had in the past, and how it currently relates to the job that they are applying for. I'll talk about what I mean by this a little bit later, but I think you might get the gist from this itself. So basically, you do not have to focus on the objective of your job search. You just have to write a small summary of your work experience. All right. Then there'll be mention of skills. There'll be mention of professional experience, your past work experience. Then there'll be mention of your education, your achievements, especially achievements regarding your work or during your education, notable achievements. Then there'll be a section for certifications, and there'll be a section for projects. All right. After providing all of this information, if you have some space, you can also include the languages that are known and the fluency of these languages, some sort of professional memberships that you might have. These are good to have. Not everyone is going to have, hence the reason I'm putting this under good to have. And finally, some references and testimonials are always welcome in a resume, because that is what actually provides an element of trust into a resume. All right. Apart from this, there are certain elements which a lot of candidates actually include in a resume, which I don't think is relevant or you should include in a resume. For example, let's look at some of the elements which are not required to be put on a resume. For example, irrelevant hobbies. All right. So a lot of time, especially in the case of freshers, as well as like a very accomplished, even in the case of a lot of experienced candidates as well, I see this problem that a lot of candidates actually mention a lot of irrelevant hobbies. All right. So what do I mean by irrelevant hobby? Let's say if you are applying for a for a cashier position. All right. You're applying for a cashier position at a shopping mall. All right. In that case, if you are mentioning your hobby of playing video games, it just does not relate to your job. All right. So in that case, don't you think this is it is almost like it almost seems unprofessional to include such an irrelevant hobby into a document which is meant to provide you employment, right? So irrelevant hobbies, it is much better to leave them out. All right. But there's a caveat to this. I do have a slide of in the end about this topic as well. The other thing which I used to see a lot of resumes actually write down in the past, this is not, thankfully, this is a very, this trend is already over. Thank God this trend is over. But I used to see a lot of resumes which actually mention a lot of unnecessary filler information, especially from management graduates. What I used to see was a lot of people used to do the SWOT analysis in their resumes. I think if you have a strong enough work experience and some good testimonials, I don't think a SWOT analysis is needed, because a SWOT analysis is meant to be done by the hiring manager, not from the candidate's point of view. And another issue with providing a lot of these filler information like SWOT analysis and irrelevant hobbies is that a lot of people actually copy resumes from their friends and some other people, and like they look at references and they copy a lot of information. All right. So let's say if you mention a hobby, like let's say you like to play football. All right. You might not be very genuinely interested in playing football, but you wrote that you are interested in playing football. Now when the interview time comes, there might be a possibility that the hiring manager might start asking you questions about your hobby on football. Uh, in that case, if you're not genuinely interested in such a hobby, you are going to fail miserably. All right. So this is one of the reasons why it is always better to actually leave out irrelevant hobbies. It is always better to leave out unnecessary filler information like SWOT analysis. For example, if you wrote your weakness as being a people pleaser, or let's say someone who is who is not able to be rude to people, a hiring manager might actually grill you on questions like, let's say if you have to fire someone, how are you going to handle it, since you have written in your resume that you are a very polite person. All right, so these sort of questions might arise if you put something like a SWOT analysis in your resume, so it is always better to leave them out. All right, now let's focus on each one of the essential common elements one by one, so that we can actually get an idea of how to craft an effective resume. Firstly, the contact information. All right, so let's go point by point. Firstly, you need to create a professional looking email address. All right, you need to keep it short, you need to keep it concise. For example, let's say for a person named, let's say, Aditya Ranade. All right, a good email might be adityaforjobs@gmail.com. It is always better if you can create an email address just for the job search part. I see a lot of people actually put email addresses like Bikerbo Aditya. The second bad example is a relevant is actually a valid email address, I would say. But the only problem is that it is so damn long that it is just not possible to like mention it over phone to someone. And another thing that you actually have to keep in mind, nowadays people actually switch jobs quite frequently. All right, so people actually switch jobs within 3 or 4 years typically. That is the norm in most of the industries, especially in the corporate sector. So it is always better to actually create an email address solely dedicated to your job search. In that way, anything regarding job notification, anything regarding vacancy notification, you are going to receive in that email address itself, and it is always easier to like segregate your emails that way. So my request is, please create a very short, a very concise email address just for the job search. For example, in this email address for adityaforjobs@gmail.com, this is a email address that I can mention over the phone, and there's a very high likelihood that there's going to be no typos in typing out this email address. All right, so this is one of the reasons why I always request everyone to create a professional looking email address. For example, in my case, my email address is Santanu, santanu.ncs@gmail.com. So this is a very short email address, and this looks professional, and it segregates all of my personal emails and all of my bank emails from the emails which I receive professionally. All right, so that is how you create a email for your resume. Then we come to the address part. Now the thing is that this is one of the issues that we have actually faced at NCS, which is the location which is mentioned in a resume is very critical. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that whatever resume that you provide in your whatever address that you provide in your resume, it might be used for a background check via a house visit or an address proof. All right, a lot of people actually overlook this issue and they put whatever address that comes to their mind. So please make sure that you provide a valid address, at least an address which you can prove via some sort of a address proof, for example via your driving license. All right, so always mention such a location. If you are unable to provide a valid location, for example, if let's say if someone from the hiring team actually visits you for a background check and he's unable to find you at your home address, there's a high likelihood that you are going to get rejected. Especially what I've seen is that in a lot of these MNCs nowadays, they actually do a lot of house visits. All right. So this is the reason why providing a reachable location in the place where you are applying for is actually required. All right. Similarly, in some countries, they actually mandate a local addresses even for overseas candidates. For example, if you're applying for a job in Dubai, what I've heard is that it is always preferable to actually put a local address rather than your permanent address, simply because a lot of companies and a lot of countries, I would say, actually mandate a local address even for overseas candidates. In those cases, you can actually put an address of your friend who resides over there, or a relatives who resides over there, rather than putting your permanent address, because there's a high degree of probability that if it is not a local address, your resume is simply going to be cast aside. All right. The third point that I'd like to touch upon is simply your phone number is essential. Please make sure that the contact number that you are provided is valid. All right. And the other thing is that your phone number should be mentioned in a place where it is easy to find. Typically, a phone number should be at the very top of your resume, as well as the footer of the resume. I see time and time again where a lot of people actually put their phone number in the second page of a resume. Now, the problem is that in case the second page of the resume, it comes apart, there's a high degree of probability that your contact information is simply going to get lost. All right. So that is why always make sure that you put the phone number in the first page itself, and just highlight it. Especially use a bold character to highlight your phone number that you're providing in your resume. The second essential information is the summary part. Now, this I need to get a little bit deeper. All right. So the thing is that what a lot of people do is that while writing the summary at the top of the resume, what a lot of people do is that they write the objective or goal for looking at a job. For example, someone might write their objective or goal in the summary part as an electrician who is looking for an electrician job, or someone like let's say looking to find looking for a project analyst job at a demanding job profile. All right. This is not a very effective way of writing a summary, simply because typically what I tell a lot of my typically what I tell people who are actually crafting the resume to avoid writing such sort of an objective or a goal, because it seems very self-centered. All right. So instead of writing an objective or a goal, what you should think about is what the recruiter is actually looking in your profile. So your summary must be short, sentence, 2-3 sentences, and crisp, and should demonstrate transferable value which is relevant to the job that you're applying for. You should make it interesting. You should make it unique. All right. So let's look at a good example. A good example is an HR professional with 2 years experience in recruitment. So it already establishes that this person has actually worked in HR. He has primarily worked in the early recruitment process. So it immediately gives an idea to the hiring team that this person will be suited for early recruitment process, or any process which has to do with the early recruitment process. So this person is not going to be considered for, let's say, a payroll sort of a role. All right. Including sourcing and vetting candidates, passionate about tech recruitment. So this statement actually piques the interest of the recruiter, having worked as an IT recruiter at Company X. And finally, he says he has done MBA in HR from XYZ University. So this summary is enough to make a hiring manager simply consider this candidate for a HR role if he's considering someone in order to intake into an early recruitment process. But what happens is a lot of people actually write something else. A lot of people are going to actually write something like an HR professional seeking to grow in a highly ambitious organization. In that case, this is not a very good summary, simply because you are writing it from your point of view, you are writing it from a very self-centered point of view, and it just does not provide enough context to consider you for an interview. So there's a very high degree of probability that you are going to be cast aside simply because there's going to be other people who are going to write a much better summary than you. All right, so keep this in mind while writing the summary. Always think of the summary from the point of the hiring manager and the company that you're applying for. You have to think about what the company is seeking and how you can appeal to the company's need rather than what your own objective is. Thirdly, we come to the skills. All right, so specifically you have to mention specific and relevant keywords. I'll just show you a small demo of how you can screen out the specific and relevant keywords. Then you have to mention the skills mentioned should make your resume seem relevant even at a quick glance. All right, so do not write long paragraphs of skills, rather make a short list of skills which can be glanced over, and the hiring manager can actually make a note of what sort of skills you possess. This, of course, actually refers to resumes which are sent directly to HR managers. All right, I'm not talking about resumes which are sent over platforms like LinkedIn and job boards. All right, I'll mention why that is. Simply, the second point you only have to keep in mind when you are sending the resume or handing the resume directly to the hiring manager. If you are sending it online, the second point is not relevant for you. The third thing that you have to mention in your resume is your employment history. All right, this is one of the most essential things that you have to mention. You have to mention your past work experience. If you do not have a past work experience, let's say if you are a fresher, you can mention some sort of a summer jobs, internships that you might have had. If you do not possess such sort of information, for example, a lot of people who are actually preparing for government jobs, all right, so what happens is that since they are preparing for some sort of a government job, they might not have a lot of past work experience or summer jobs or internships. In those cases, I would highly request such sort of candidates to enroll themselves to some sort of an NGO and at least start doing some sort of a volunteer work. Because if your plan of a government job does not work out, you will have to start applying for corporate roles as well. In those cases, a volunteer work experience is extremely valuable in such sort of a cases. All right, if you do not have either one of these information in your resume, there's a high degree of probability that your resume is simply going to be rejected. All right, there's no other way. You have to find some sort of information. For example, you always have to try and cover up any gaps in your work experience. For example, if you took a year off, maybe let's say in order to pursue a government exam, all right, just do not try to keep it blank in your work experience. Just volunteer for some sort of a work experience in any local NGO that you can find. Do the minimum work that you can work in that organization, and at least try to cover up the gap in your work experience that way. You just simply do not mention that you were actually preparing for so and so exams, because that actually sends a very negative signal, unfortunately, in India. So always I would recommend try to cover up any gaps of work experience, but please do it ethically. I am not telling anyone to do it unethically in a way that a lot of people actually place fake job experience in their resumes. Please do not do it. You are going to get it's going to come up when the background check happens. So it is always better to do this sort of thing ethically. All right, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that the work employment history, you should actually mention the current to the last experience. That means in a reverse chronological order. Let's say the current work experience that you have should come at the top, and the past work experience, it should come last. Anything which is typically older than 3 years, I think you can just start shortening those sort of responsibilities, and always make sure you keep it crisp with relevant responsibilities only. Do not put a lot of irrelevant work experience in your resume, because simply making a very long resume is not going to make you appealing to a hiring manager. All right, now moving on. Same thing in the case of educational qualification. You just mention your major, your board, university, state, city of education, and your year of passing. Now a lot of people actually mention their grades in their resume, but I would differ a little in this point, saying that you do not need to mention the grades in your resume unless and until the job role requires that a grade needs to be mentioned in the resume, where marks based shortlisting is done. For example, in a lot of government roles, all right, in a lot of government consultancy roles, marks based shortlisting is done. All right, so in those cases it is always recommended to put your grades, but if it is not mentioned, I would not request anyone to put their grades unless and until you are very academically inclined. All right, similar to providing your work experience, you should list them in reverse chronological order, and always aggressively shorten information which is older than 3 years. For example, let's say if you have already completed your masters, it just does not make any sense to mention how much marks you got in your class 10th or how much marks you got in your class 12. All right, so you can just simply mention your board and the year of passing, and that's it. You do not have to mention what percentage you got in your class 10. All right, this makes for a very it makes for a very uncomfortable discussion with your HR manager, if he decides to like focus on that aspect. So it is always better to leave that information out. All right, but your the recent experience of maybe pursuing your masters, you can actually provide some sort of information in your educational qualifications in this regard. All right, then you have to mention achievements. In terms of achievements, what I would say is that having some sort of a highly coveted award, especially outside of your work, is a major highlight in standing out of the competition, especially in a country like India, where a lot of people actually possess a lot of identical work experience as well as uh, past educational experience. So in those cases, I would say mention activities that you have engaged in such a way that portray your personality. For example, if you are very interested in playing Sudoku, all right, you can mention in your hobbies. A lot of people actually mention that they are interested in playing Sudoku, but what you can mention is that if you are interested in playing Sudoku, just start getting involved into that hobby in a very serious sort of a way. A lot of people actually in India, actually they do not cultivate a very serious sort of a dedicated hobby, and I think this is very crucial, because what happens if you are, let's say, a, a small time champion in a highly coveted, let's say, Sudoku competition. All right, that is something to brag about, and that you can put in your resume, and this is one of the ways in which you can actually stand out from the competition. So whatever hobby that you decide to pursue, just do it at the level where you can start bragging about that activity. All right, or that hobby. Now, on the topic of photographs. Now, this is a very contentious issue. I see a lot of people actually put their photographs. Some recommend putting the photographs, some recommend leaving the photograph. My feedback regarding this is that leave it out of the role if you do not need to show your face, unless, for example, if you're applying for a role of a model or a TV anchor. All right, so let's say if you are applying for any sort of corporate jobs, 99% of the time your photograph is just not required. If you still have to include your photograph and you have to appear for an interview, what maybe you can do is like attach this photograph with a paper clip. All right, but there's a small caveat regarding this. All right, this is not a point that is usually mentioned. Now, the company that you're applying for, where you are applying for a job, this also matters in terms of putting the photograph. For example, if you are applying for, let's say, a company in Europe, or if you are applying for a company US, if you're putting your photograph, there's a very high degree of probability that your resume is simply going to get rejected, because there are laws in place in a lot of countries where discriminating on the basis of looks is a very highly debated issue. All right, so a lot of companies do not want to get into the controversy of selecting someone on the basis of their photographs, or at least like fight the accusation that someone was chosen on the basis of the looks. So simply what they do is, anyone who includes their photographs, their resume is simply chucked aside. All right, so let's say if you are applying for any sort of MNC roles in India, it is always a good role, you just leave out the photograph, do not include a photograph in your resume. But there's a counter example as well. In a lot of these Eastern Asian countries, for example, in the case of Korea or in the case of Japan, what I've heard is that a, a lot of organizations in these countries actually put a lot of emphasis on how someone looks. All right, so in that cases, if you're applying for a company which is actually based out of Korea or Japan, it is a recommended practice that you should actually put your photograph over there. But this is only a very niche case, I would say. This is not a very highly relevant use case, but you have to think about what sort of context this like resume is going to be used in. So in normal cases, leaving out the photograph is the best course of action. All right, now do's and don'ts of writing a resume. It should be very neat and easy to read, highlight strength and skills. So these we have already gone through. You do not write abbreviations, you do not write long complicated paragraphs, you do not put fluffy content. That is I think understood. Now some basic common sense: do not make your resume a place where you include a lot of fancy fonts, a lot of loud colors. All right, if you're applying for a creative role, let's say for a marketing manager or a art director or a graphic designer, that's a very different use case. But for a lot of conventional jobs, it's always better to leave creativity out of your resume. All right, the second point, this is something that you need to keep in mind. For every job that you're applying for, you need to customize your resume and your cover letter to fit that job description for which you are applying for. All right, so basically what do I mean by this is that if you are creating one resume today, you cannot expect that this resume is going to be relevant for every job that you are going to apply to. So simply you have to keep in mind is that you'll need to customize, you'll need to keep changing the resume according to the job that you're applying for. And the third point is a basic common sense, is refrain from adding irrelevant details. I have gone through this point over and over again, but I'm still reiterating my point. You always refrain from adding irrelevant details, because irrelevant details are the sort of things which actually creates a lot of unconventional discussions when you get to the interview round. So it is always a good idea to refrain from adding irrelevant details. In short, keep it professional and keep it relevant to the job that you're applying for. Now, on the left side of my screen, I have an example of a very bad sort of a resume. For example, it includes a photograph. It includes a very sort of a fancy sort of a font. It also includes a font that is very hard to read. All right. On my right side, I have a decent sort of a resume, I would say, which I think a lot of people actually can start like adopting. All right. I'll like you can maybe take a screenshot of this and like go through this slide as well. Now moving on, this is something that you need to keep in mind. All right, so the traditional use case of a resume was basically for a hiring manager to decide whether to invite you for an interview. All right, so that is the reason why your resume should only reveal specific and important details about you. All right, so you come across as a compelling person, prompting the hiring manager to call you for an interview and to let you know and understand more about you. You do not need to write every single thing about your work experience in your resume itself. This is in regards to the traditional use case of a resume. In the cases where we hand out physical copies of our resumes, right? So typically a hiring manager actually spends only 8 seconds to shortlist a resume for further processes. All right. So in India, we do still come across the traditional use case of a resume where we still hand out physical copies of a resume, but the traditional use case of a resume is actually still highly relevant in a lot of developed countries. For example, in the case of US, all right, in the case of US, what you will see even in the case of very highly coveted institutes like, let's say, Harvard or a Princeton or an MIT, what you will find is that even in these institutions, a lot of these institutions do not actually host the sort of placement drives which we see in a lot of colleges and universities in India. So what a lot of candidates from these universities and institutes do is that they actually take a printout of their resumes and they actually hand these out to actual hiring managers. They meet up with the hiring manager for a session and they actually hand out these resumes. In that case, the traditional use case of a resume is still highly relevant at this point of time. So I'll highly recommend everyone to create a traditional use resume, a resume which can be printed out and handed over to a HR manager. But nowadays, this is the age of AI, all right? So nowadays, what happens after the advent of application tracking systems? So ATS or application tracking system refers to certain softwares which actually shortlist resumes, all right? So in those cases, a traditional way of actually creating a resume is simply not going to cut it, because an application tracking system actually looks at a lot of keywords which are being included in your resume. And if you are actually creating a resume from the traditional point of creating a resume, it is simply not going to cut it, all right? However, one thing that I would like to mention is that what a lot of people actually nowadays do is that they include a lot of irrelevant keywords, certain keywords which should not actually feature in your resume, simply to get invited to an interview. And during the interview, it is found out that these people are actually not at all familiar with the subject matter that they have mentioned in their resume. And in those cases, it sends a very negative signal about these candidates. For example, let's say if you have done an MCA, all right, if you mention that you have work experience in AWS and you simply do not possess enough skills of working in AWS, it is actually going to create a lot of tough questions during your interviews, all right? So even though if you're applying through LinkedIn and you mention AWS and you got invited to an interview, at the later stages of the interview, especially during the technical rounds, you are most likely going to get rejected, all right? So using unscrupulous or unfair means to like set up an interview by gaming the ATS, all right, by fooling the ATS is not recommended, I would say, all right? Now here comes the interesting part, all right? Now what happened was, we were actually talking about the hiring process at a glance in this slide, all right? So this was the slide where I was talking about that typically what a company used to do was they used to publish a job description, collect application details, preliminary shortlist, interview round, issuing an offer letter, acceptance offer letter, complete background checks, signing of an employment contract, and onboarding, all right? So this was the traditional way of onboarding a candidate. But nowadays, this traditional form of onboarding is not actually done in a lot of organizations. Why is that? So typically what happens, a common issue that I find is that a lot of people actually complain that they are sending resumes. They have actually sent, like, let's say 20 resumes or 15 resumes to different companies over LinkedIn, and they are simply getting rejected, all right? So they are simply getting rejected, and now they are trying to polish their resumes. They're stuffing a lot of irrelevant keywords into their resumes, and still it's not working out. So in that cases, I think actually rather than devoting a lot of time actually like trying to create the perfect sort of a resume, I think you should actually start looking elsewhere. Because uh, because simply nowadays, in the age of AI and in the age of the application tracking system, it is just simply not enough to have a very good looking resume. You actually have to understand the the behind the scenes, the actual BTS of the application tracking system, or ATS. All right. So how a hiring process actually works nowadays is that typically a job listing is firstly created by the hiring manager, and this job listing is actually fed to an application tracking system. All right, so application tracking system actually refers to certain softwares, like for example, there's a software called Teleo, there's a software called Workday. You, if you have applied for a lot of jobs through LinkedIn, you might have actually come across Workday. All right, Workday or Salesforce jobs. So what these application tracking systems do is that they actually publish these job listings on a lot of job boards. All right, so they like publish the job listings on a lot of job boards, and after like listing these jobs on the job boards, whoever applies for these jobs, these are actually collected by the application tracking system itself. All right, and this application tracking system actually starts looking for resumes which actually has certain keywords associated with this resumes. All right, so it is going to look into certain keywords. For example, in the case of people who are from IT backgrounds, maybe for a network engineer role, it might look into keywords like a CCNE, or a sisters Cisco certified engineer, or for example, or let's say if you are applying for a cloud engineer role, maybe it's going to look into things like working with servers or things like that. All right, so that is how a application tracking system works. An application tracking system actually lists the jobs in a lot of other places as well. For example, in the case of social media, for example, in the case of LinkedIn, a lot of these job listings are actually made by application tracking systems. All right, and whenever you apply through jobs via LinkedIn, these are actually fed back to the application tracking system, and the application tracking system actually scans for resume looking at certain keywords. All right, so the point that I'm trying to make is that the application tracking system is not looking at the nuances of your work experience, it is simply looking at keywords. And this is the reason why a lot of applications actually get rejected. So the only way in which you can actually get a job through a job board or a LinkedIn is to apply in bulk. So you will have to start applying for 500,000 or 2,000 roles just to get invited to an interview. Now, a lot of candidates actually say that I have actually applied for 10 job roles and I'm not getting invited. The simple answer is that if you are applying for jobs through LinkedIn or job boards, there is a very low likelihood that you are going to get invited for an interview, simply because an application tracking system is actually making that decision, and it is only looking at the specific keywords. It is not looking at a lot of nuances regarding your work experience. All right, and what happens if you are applying for a small number of roles, there's a high degree of probability that an application tracking system is simply going to reject you, and you are going to be sent a rejection email. All right, now, if you're one of the lucky few who actually manages to go past the application tracking system, typically these are the people who are actually having a lot of work experience. They still go through they still pass through they qualify through application tracking system, and they actually go through a phone screening, and finally they face a face-to-face interview. Now the thing is that you have to keep one statistic in mind. I do not have any specific statistic regarding India, but regarding a lot of job search in the US, there's a widely held statistic which is actually quoted in a lot of HR related publications, is that only about 4% of people who apply for job listings via job boards and LinkedIn actually get invited to an interview. All right, so let's say if 100 candidates apply for a job in America, only 4 people are actually going to get a chance to interview face to face. and out of these people, only not zero, only 1.8% of people actually find a job out of these 4 people. All right, so this is a very minuscule, a very small number of people who actually qualify for a job through these jobs, so through these job boards and through LinkedIn. All right, so if you're applying for job boards and LinkedIn, the simple answer is you have to start applying in bulk. The more jobs that you apply to, the more likelihood that you are going to get selected for an interview. All right, but one thing that you have to keep in mind is that only apply for jobs that you are qualified for, because if you keep applying for the same company with a lot of irrelevant information, for example, if you're applying for American Express, all right, and you do not possess the minimum qualification for it, if you keep applying for these sort of roles in American Express for which you are not actually qualified for, a lot of cases an application tracking system is actually going to send you a rejected email simply because if you are applying for job roles which you are not qualified at all. All right, so the thing is that you have to apply in bulk, but you also have to keep in mind that you need to be qualified for a job role before applying. For example, if the job role calls for a 5-year work experience with a 1-year work experience, please do not apply for such sort of roles. All right, if you possess maybe like a 4-year work experience, you might consider sending a job application for a job role that requires a 5-year work experience. But if you possess a 1-year work experience or a 2-year work experience, do not apply for a job which requires a 5-year work experience, because if you keep applying for such job roles which you are not qualified for, in a lot of cases the application tracking system will directly reject your application simply on the basis that you are applying over and over again for jobs which you are not qualified for. So how do you get over this issue? One of the issues is that you can go through job fairs and campus drives. So as you can understand, applying for job boards and LinkedIn is a volume game. If you are not willing to play the volume game, you apply for job drives and campus drive. All right, so a lot of candidates actually, especially in a lot of tier 3 colleges, they tend to ignore job fairs and campus drives simply because they think the job openings which are being listed in job fairs and campus drive, they are just not lucrative enough. They think they are actually eligible for much greater employment opportunity outside of this campus drive. But the major benefit of a job fair or a campus drive, even like under the National Career Service Project in which I am working in, under the Ministry of Labor and Employment, we actually host a lot of regular job fairs in our district as well as in a lot of colleges. And the thing is that a lot of candidates actually look over job fairs as work opportunities which are like not very highly coveted. But the benefit of a job drive or a campus placement is that you can actually bypass a lot of the application tracking system scanning by simply checking reference and sending it directly to the HR manager. So for a fresher, one of the easiest ways in order to pass their physical copy of their resume to a HR manager or a hiring manager is actually through campus job drives. So if you are not considering job fairs or campus fairs simply on the basis that you are not going to find very lucrative sort of job opportunities in those job fairs and campus drives, I would highly recommend you to reconsider your positions at this point of time. All right, if you are not applying for job fairs and campus drive, especially for people who are already working in the industry, what they can do is they can actually start applying for internal roles. They can directly go face-to-face interview. And another option, if you do not have the ability or if you have not found a good opportunity to job fairs and campus drive, one idea that I can give you is you start getting referrals. What do I mean by referrals? By referrals, I mean to say is that you start networking aggressively. For example, let's say for example, if someone is interested in computer security, I would highly recommend that you start attending conventions. You start attending meetups regarding your topic of interest. So in a lot of these big metro cities, there are meetups regarding every conceivable topic that you can think about. All right, So maybe if you are interested in a sales role, start identifying unions of sales representatives, or meetups of salespeople, or you can like reach out to people who are already working in a sales role, and you can maybe ask them for a referral. All right. Through referrals, the benefit is that you can directly go to a phone screening round, and then after that phone screening you can go to a face-to-face interview. All right. So you can directly bypass the issue of ATS. So the thing is that through ATS, if you are through job boards and LinkedIn, if you are applying, you have to apply in bulk. But if you are going through referrals, job fairs, campus drive, and internal, or if you are applying as an internal applicant, you can just bypass the ATS system and directly go to a face-to-face interview. Now, after the face-to-face interview, what's going to happen is that the HR is going to ask two questions. Simply, are you skilled enough? Are you good? Are you a good fit for the organization? In these cases, a traditional resume, which is crisp, which is concise, which is highly relevant to the work that you are applying for, comes handy. If you do not possess a good traditional resume, it might possess a lot of keywords, but if it is not easy to read, there's a high degree of probability that you might get rejected at this stage of the hiring process. All right. So it is always a good idea to have a good, crisp, easy to read resume. If you qualified in terms of being skilled enough and also possessing a good fit for the organization, what's going to happen is you will be offered the offer letter. You will need to now make the decision whether you need to take up the offer. If you reject the offer, either it's going to go into renegotiation, or most likely in the case of freshers, you are going to get passed along. If you accept the offer, a background check is going to happen. All right. In that case, this is the reason why I always recommend that candidates should be very truthful in the details that they are providing in the resume. Please do not use unscrupulous means to get invited to an interview, because even if you get passed through all of these stages, there's a high degree of probability that you are going to fail at the background check stage. All right. So always create the resume to the best of your ability, and through that shows you in the best light possible. Do not adopt any unfair means to get invited to an interview. All right. After that, you are going to sign an employment contract, and finally your status is actually updated on the application tracking system. All right. Now there will be a question of 2-column versus 1-column resume. All right. The simple answer is that if you are applying for a traditional resume, for example, if you are going to hand over this resume to the HR, to a HR or a hiring manager or a talent acquisition manager, always make sure that you create a 2-column resume, simply because it is easier to read. For example, the left side of the screen, you can see a human readable like a resume, because this is a 2-column resume. This is much more easier to read. But the problem is that in a lot of cases, these 2-column resumes are actually confusing for a lot of application tracking system. So if you are applying for, let's say, through LinkedIn or through a job portal or through the company website, it is much better to actually create a single column resume. All right. One thing that I'd like to point out is that in case of a 2-column resume, the sort of resume that you see on the left side of the screen, you can actually create a 1-column or you can create a 2-column resume within 1 page itself. It is very easy to create a very highly dense, a highly readable resume within a single page if you are using 2 columns. But in the case of a single column resume, I would say you can maybe stretch it to maybe 2 pages, because what I have found from my experience is that it is very hard, even for a 3-year-old a candidate who is possessing a 3-year-old work experience, to actually create a single page 1-column resume. All right. So if you are going for a ATS-friendly resume, you can maybe go to 2 or 3 pages as well. But for this traditional sort of a resume, always shorten it to a single always shorten it to a single page resume. All right. The final thing before like ending my slideshow is that there's a common expression that we come across. All right. So we see this is a small sort of expression that comes from British English, which says that which says polishing a turd. What it means is that it is a colloquial expression. All right. It means attempting to improve something which is inherently flawed or unpleasant, often to the point where effort is futile or pointless. It implies that no amount of cosmetic change can fix a fundamental problem. So one of the issues that you might face is that, let's say you are not getting invited to an interview on the basis of your resume. Now, what a lot of people do is that they actually expend a lot of energy just polishing their resumes over and over and over again. But you also need to ask a simple question to yourself. Maybe you might not possess the basic level of skill which is required for the job roles that you are applying for. All right. So in those kind of cases, what you can do is you can actually reconsider your position. You can actually go and start looking for ways in which you can start acquiring additional skills which might get you selected, rather than just polishing your resumes over and over again. All right. So like revising and improving your resume always has benefits, but beyond a point of time, just obsessing about like creating the most perfect resume might not actually make a lot of sense. All right. So I think I'm making some sense over here. So always make sure that you actually actually acquire the skills which will be required in order to bag a job, right? So the last slide is basically, this is my LinkedIn contact. If someone wants to connect, you can connect with me over LinkedIn via this slide. Now I would like to ask do I have any additional time that I need to, or like do I need to end the session at this point of time? Like,
Yes, sir. We have some few questions. If it is okay for you to clarify it,
okay.
we have some couple of questions. Is it okay, sir?
Okay, no, not an issue.
All right. Sir, can you just stop sharing so they can see?
Okay. Not an issue.
All right. So the first question we have that which project to showcase in CV, or should I change the CV every time applying to a different company based on different job role?
Okay, so this is a relevant question like regarding my discussion. I would say simply the question is a little bit wrong in the sense that typically we do not send a CV to companies for which we are applying for jobs, right? If you are applying for a job, you should always send a resume. And the second thing is that a resume should always be crafted according to the job that you are applying for. All right. So for example, I'll just show a small point over here. I think this will be highly relevant to the question that the candidate is asking. I think that this is important to show this point of time, right? So let's look at LinkedIn. All right. So let's look at LinkedIn. If I go to jobs, all right. So I'm just showing you a traditional way of actually looking for how we used to craft a resume back at our time. All right. So what we used to do was we actually looked at the job description. Right. So let's say this is a HR role at Deutsche Bank. Right. So this is a HR role at Deutsche Bank. So what's going to happen is that typically a lot of people actually use ChatGPT for this at this point of time. But I would not recommend, if you're early into the job search process, I will not request you to like lean a lot on ChatGPT at this point of time, because you need to know about the manual way of like crafting a very effective resume. Because even though we might have calculators, we still rely on how we should we are able to like do addition and subtraction. All right, so we need to know the basics. So typically what we used to do was we selected this, we selected all of this job description. What we used to do is we used to go to a word cloud generator. For example, let's say we used to go to a word cloud generator. Now what this word cloud generator is going to do, maybe like you might use ChatGPT for this as well, but a word cloud generator is much more highly visual in its working, so it's much easier to work that way. So let's say if I'm okay, so I'm using this word cloud generator. All right, so what I'm going to do is that, let's say I'm going to edit this word list. So what I'll do is, okay, so I'm going to generate a word list from the text. So I'll just paste the entire job description that I copied from the job description. So what this is going to give me is a small word cloud. It is going to give me a small word cloud regarding which sort of keywords are actually showing up in this job opening. All right, the first decision is that if this word cloud just does not interest me, in the sense that, let's say if I want to work in a HR role, but I want to work in a tech role. All right, I can see from this word cloud there's simply no mention of any technologies regarding these job roles. All right, so I can just simply pass along this work opportunity, because if I applying for it thinking that this is a tech role, I'm going to get highly disappointed. All right, so this is one of the reasons why I always request everyone to like at least put the job description through a word cloud generator rather than relying on ChatGPT. The problem with ChatGPT is that it is going to give you an output, but it is not going to give you an idea whether this job role will be fitting for you or not. This is the sort of question that ChatGPT just simply cannot answer. All right, so let's say after this, let's say after looking at the word cloud, if I'm interested in applying for this job role, what I can do is that I can just look at the keywords which are being highlighted in those word cloud. Let's say support. All right, let's say skills, people, work, training. All right, so these sort of keywords are coming up. What you can do is that whenever you are crafting your resume for that job role, you just try to include some of these keywords in your resume. For example, if you are putting your past work experience, you can mention the support activities that you have performed in your job role. If you keep reiterating the sort of Excel work that you have been doing in your work experience, Excel is just simply not mentioned here. All right, so what a lot of people do is that they keep mentioning Excel in their resumes, but they're simply not mention of support if they are applying for such sort of a job role. All right, so in that case, you just simply try to hit some of these keywords. Similarly, when you are providing your work experience summary, you can maybe highlight the sorry, there's a power cut issue out here. Yeah, I'm connected. Right? Can you verify?
Yeah, fine, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So like there's actually I was expecting a power cut simply because of the rain issue that we are actually facing out here. Like it's even the thunderstorm actually issue out here. So yeah. So this is one of the ways like we need to where you can actually decide on like how to craft a resume, and always make sure that you actually craft a resume which is suited for the job role that you are applying for. And you will actually need to like redo the resume over and over again for each one of the job roles. All right, but for CVs, typically CVs are not actually crafted according to the role that you are applying for. Typically we only create one CV and we just send it to each one of the positions that we are applying for. But then again, a CV is only sent for academic roles. This is not sent for corporate jobs. All right, so the question is a little bit wrong, incorrect in that sense. But for the second part of the question, I would say for every resume that you are sending, you need to change it according to the job role. Right. Yeah. Next question.
Got it, sir. There is some relevant thing question. As a fresher, do they need to? They don't have experience, right? So
Yeah.
what they should put in the experience, or they should add internships as experience? Can they
Yes.
put on that?
Yes. So any sort of internships are not just for like freshers, I would say. Internships can also be like included by people like who already have 1 or 2 years of work experience. So I'm just going to give you a small example, all right? So what happens typically? A lot of people actually change careers, all right? Typically, we say that an average person actually changes 6 careers during their lifetimes, all right? So,
Yeah.
for example, my background is in marketing, all right? But I work with startups. I have worked in HR. I have currently I'm working in recruiting, all right? So in those cases, what happens? Sometimes the job that you're applying for and the past work experience that you have might not be relevant to the job that you're applying for. In those cases, you can actually mention internships as well. So for example, if I had mentioned just my past work experience in marketing, if I had applied for a HR role using those job descriptions, maybe my resume might not have been selected. But the only reason why I was chosen in certain HR roles was simply because I was part of the placement committees at my college. I actually worked at a lot of outreach activities with a lot of industry partners, and that was the reason why I was actually chosen for some of the HR roles in some companies. It was not because of my marketing background. All right. So in those cases, I would say uh, you need to ask yourself what is the job role that you are applying for. If the internship is actually relevant to the job that you are applying for, you should definitely mention your internship. You should also actually mention some sort of a volunteer activities that you might have done. Maybe you might have volunteered for an NGO. Maybe you have volunteered for a community service. That is a good sort of information that you can put if you are a fresher, I would say, right? So yeah, that is my
Yeah.
opinion.
So we have in technical jobs, adding hobby list is it necessary?
Not necessary for ATS resumes. So if you are applying online, especially through LinkedIn or the for especially in case of technical resumes, I don't think like putting your hobby list is relevant at all. I think it actually also sends a very negative signal to the hiring manager, all right? So I would say just leave out the hobby list entirely. But there's a small caveat. The small caveat is that, let's say if you are applying for, let's say, a startup role, all right? Now the thing is that in a lot of these startups, your resumes are not actually read by a computer. That means your resume is not going to be read but through a application tracking system which is looking for certain keywords, all right? So in those cases, if you have to stand out among a lot of competition, I think in those cases you can maybe slide in certain sort of small accomplishments which you are very proud of. For example, you might be a very good poker player, like who has actually like won a lot of championships, all right? You can actually include these sort of informations, because startups are actually looking for people who are out of the ordinary. So if you leave out the hobby section in such a case, I think you are doing yourself a disservice in that case. So especially in the cases where the HR manager is directly going to read your resume, you can maybe include some sort of a resume. But please make sure that whatever hobby that you are mentioning, it should be a serious hobby. I mean,
Yeah.
not serious from the point of view of others, simply from the seriousness of the effort that you are putting it into. All right. So maybe like you might be interested in playing the guitar, but if you are at a very basic level of playing the guitar, it makes just no sense to put it in your hobby list. But let's say if you have pursued guitar at a very high level, or maybe you have pursued formal training for it, maybe you have pursued classical training for it, then you can maybe put it into a resume. But the caveat is, it is only recommended if you are applying it through for startups or like similar roles.
Point taken, sir. So we have the last question. The
All right.
best site to check ATS score.
Okay. The simple answer is that checking for ATS scores, there are sites as well like JobScan, and like there are other tools as well. I do not recall at this point of time. My simple answer is that it is just pointless to like check your ATS scores over these websites, because the simple fact of the matter is that uh, if you have access to a ATS checking system, everyone in the world has access to such systems, all right? So and the other thing is that in a lot of cases, especially in the case of, let's say, an ATS system like Workday, a lot of in a lot of these systems, the algorithms that these companies are using, these are proprietary algorithms. Nobody has any idea how these algorithms actually work behind the scenes. So the ATS scores that these other tools are actually spitting out, all right, these scores are actually not relevant, because the thing is that these tools might be using some sort of a criteria which actual employers might not be using it, uh, which these actual employers might not be using, all right? So checking your ATS score is simply pointless, I would say, especially in the age of AI. I would say ATS score is completely pointless. But this one thing that I need to point out: try to whatever information that you put in your resume, please do not download a pre-made template and try to fill out information to fill out that template. Rather, just work backwards. You just look at one of the slides that I mentioned out here. Uh, for example, I mentioned all of the essential elements that you need to put into a CV, right? So like, this was the slide. So these were some of the essential elements that you might need to put into a CV, all right? You just go through this list in an orderly manner. For example, firstly, while creating a resume, you just open a blank Google Docs document. You just put your name and contact info. Then you figure out a way on how to put your objective and your summary. Then you put your skills. Then you put your professional experience. Then you put your education. Then you put your achievements, certifications, and projects. What a lot of people actually do is that they just go online, they download a word format, all right, thinking that this format is going to be ATS friendly. Now the problem is that whenever you are downloading a format, it is, you are actually subconsciously trying to hit a certain level of information that will fill out that resume, all right? So which is actually walking backwards, all right? You can definitely walk using your hands, but this is not recommended. The simple thing is that downloading a template and like filling it out with an ATS is simply pointless. The second thing is that I see a lot of people actually now use a lot of AI tools, for example, Chat GPT or Claude, in order to like craft their resumes. This is also pointless, because the thing is that for people like us, people who are actually going through hundreds of resumes every day, we can usually identify when a resume is actually written using an AI. All right. So even though if you are using an AI to craft a resume, please do not copy and paste everything from the AI itself. You need to use your brain, you need to use your mind in order to like how you are going to put forward that information. Sometimes what happens, this is a real story, I would say. Actually, in one of my job searches, what happened was I was actually using a resume which was actually converting a lot. I mean, I was getting a lot of interview calls using that resume, and that resume I used a traditional method, in the sense that I simply like opened a Google Docs, I wrote it myself. I did not use a AI tool. Now when the AI tools uh, initially when they came into the picture, I'm talking about like Chat GPT 3.0, all right? I'm talking about that sort of an era when these chat tools actually came on board. I actually tried using one of these AI tools. What happened was, actually my percentage of callbacks from this resume actually went down, even though I thought that the resume which was crafted by the AI was, it actually seemed superior to me. But I was actually bluffing myself, all right, because it was a very new sort of experience. It was like a toy for me, all right. So what I thought was this I always has this false sense of inferiority in front of an AI. What I thought was, actually I was crafting actually ineffective resumes simply because I was using my brain. But in my experience, actually AI actually gave me a much inferior product as compared to what I wrote myself, right? So always make sure, do not copy and paste a lot of these output from the AI tools, because if you put it through the ATS, just like we can identify an AI written resume, an ATS most likely can identify and like a AI written like a AI written AI written resume. So in that case, writing using an AI is not recommended, and also checking your score through an ATS score is actually not recommended, because in my experience, like ATS score just does not mean anything, because the algorithms which are going to be used to evaluate your resume, it is just simply not available to the openly in the public domain. Right. Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for clarifying. Actually, we got a question while asking you that can
Yeah.
we write or make a resume using AI, but that also you have clarified nicely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful session. And our audience are keep on telling it's a nice session, interesting, informative, especially for the job seekers, and they are appreciating a lot because this session is happening live as well. So around 300 participations were there.
Okay, that's a
So I
good number.
request everyone to follow Sir. You can scan and follow him. You can connect with him. If you have any further doubts, if you want to have one-to-one session with Sir, you can contact him as well. So at any means, he'll be happy to help and all. Thank you, sir, once again for being with us, being with Academy InnovaWorld, for giving time and support to all the students and giving insight about how to develop and write resume and build. So many of the students were not really aware what's the difference between resume and CV. And in this session, you have given a clear picture that what's difference, why your resume is getting, rejected, what are the critical points you have highlighted clearly. So thank you, sir, for supporting that. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. So like I can like leave the session, I guess. Or
Yeah.
like
Yes, sir.
if someone asks me a question, I'll be very happy to answer as well. And if you have any other speakers on panel as well.
Yeah, we have another speakers online, sir. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, participants. So this today we had two sessions, as you know. So one session is over, and we have another session. So link will be shared shortly in the WhatsApp group. So you can follow up. The first 20 members will be taken on the Google Meet. The rest will be you can watch the session through live. That link is also going to be shared in the WhatsApp group. So thank you again. Thank you so much for your support. And before you leave, if you're really looking for a job and planning, if you're first year or still yet to get graduate, please contact sir before you develop your good and supportive resume. Thank you, everyone. See you in the another session. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
In halls of knowledge, bold and bright, stands InnovaWorld, a guiding light. With wisdom vast and skills untold, they shape the future, brave and bold.
Lavritz, are you there?
From AI's rise to research call,
sir.
they
So
train
just
the
give 5
minds to
minutes, so
conquer
we will
all.
start the
Workshops,
session in 5 minutes.
FTPs, learning grad, empowering scholars across the land.
What is
Innovation
that?
flows in all they do, breaking barriers, forging new. A legacy of growth and cheer. Academy InnovaWorld leads the frontier.
So,
Innovation flows
what
in
you're
all they
suggesting,
do, breaking barriers, forging new.
But if in case we are
Legacy
not
of growth and cheer. Academy InnovaWorld leads the frontier. Leads the frontier. Leads the frontier. Leads the frontier.
शाम को थोड़ा रहता है मैम सिक्योरिटी रीजंस करके ना तो सिग्नल्स करते हैं मैं देखता हूँ ट्राई करके इसमें क्या हासिल करता है